Welcome back to Kenya's Choice 2022. I'm Victoria Rubadiri. It is a very interesting morning that we are having today. Let me introduce my guests really quickly. From my far right, we have Edward Muriu, who is the MP for Gatanga constituency. Next to him is Fred Okango, Political Affairs Secretary, KANU. And we also have Honorable Robert Mbui, the MP for Kathiani. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming in. Of course, since August 9th, you were elected and business really started. You haven't sat as a parliament, but what are your anticipations for this new assignment? I'll begin with you, Honorable Muriu.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Once again, my name is Wakili Edward Muriu. I'm the Member of Parliament elect at Gatanga constituency. I'm also the legal secretary in charge of legal, I'm secretary in charge of legal affairs, UDA party. And thank you for this opportunity. Yes, we have a whole agenda sitting on our laps, but unfortunately, the law provides that we're supposed to go to Parliament and be sworn in within 30 days after the election. And I can see this is the last week. There are a few days remaining, so we are still very hopeful. And secondly, as you can see, there's still the issue about the presidential petition still hanging, which again, today is the day when the things will take different, the Supreme Court will make the judgment. Right. So I think that we are, as elected leaders, we are ready, because if you look at the manifesto of the UDA party, the people are asking, you promised that the Hustler Fund, where is it? They're asking, we are supposed to bring down the price of the unga. They are waiting. They're asking, we need to create the employment for the young people. They are waiting. So I would say we have a full agenda on our hands, and we are anxious to be able to serve Kenyans. The Gatanga people are anxious for me to be able to deliver to them the promises which we gave them. So we are happy where we are, and we are very optimistic that we'll be able to deliberate and be able to deliver what we promised.
Fred, before I come to you, let me come to you, Honorable Mbui, because you will be there. And just as Honorable Muriu has said, a lot of expectations, promises were made through the campaign season. So what are your anticipations for this 13th Parliament?
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. I think Parliament has its hands full when we open the House. And I think, of course, as my colleague has said, people have high expectations because of the promises given during the campaign trail. And unfortunately, some of those campaign promises were fairly unrealistic. And I hope that this seat goes to the rightful owners, so that people don't get to have elected people on false promises, and then 1 year down the road, complaints begin. Because I mean, that is how revolutions take place, when people promise too much and deliver much less than what they have promised. So I'm optimistic that the Supreme Court will make the right judgment. So obviously, then if that happens, then Kenya will be healed and will be able to move on, and Parliament then can take its rightful place and do its job. You know, the real job of Parliament is to oversight the executive, and many times people elected forget that you go there as a parliamentarian, not as a member of the executive. And you know, I've seen people hold sway for the executive in Parliament. I must say that when we go to the House, we'll be ready to make sure that we pass the laws and the legislation that is going to drive the country forward. We're going to make sure that we hold the executive to account, so that every cent that is given out by the taxpayer is used in the right manner, and Kenyans can get value for money.
That's right. You know, Fred, as Honorable Mbui said, of course, right now the executive is in limbo in terms of who that will be. But it doesn't stop the work of the 13th Parliament. You know, what are your expectations when you look at some of the members who have been voted in this time round?
Thank you so much, Vicky. First of all, I really have to congratulate my two colleagues on this panel for having been elected to sit in the 13th Parliament. But the reality is that, as Honorable Mbui said it, most of the promises that politicians made, they might not be able to fulfill because they were on the political podium, and they were using these to get to Parliament. Now they have got into Parliament. The fact of the matter is that the people elected members of Parliament in the National Assembly and the Senate. And to that extent, it is their role to address the issues of concern to the public, resolve them, and also represent them in their legislation. If you look at the agenda of most of these members of parliament who are now elected, one way or another, they must find their issues in the legislative floor. And that means they must make laws, they must look into policies that will be of interest to the public. They have to do that. We have seen members of parliament who go there, sit for 5 years, never talk, never sponsor any bill, and then, you know, they come back, ask for votes again. I want to see a very active 13th Parliament, a Parliament that knows the role of Parliament as articulated in Article 94, a Parliament that resolves the issues and of concern to the people, because that is why they're elected. We know that the executive is in a limbo, but I can also assure you, Vicky, by today, we shall actually know where we're headed. And we have seen attempts by different parts of political formations, particularly those who you are competing with, trying to woo some of these elected members to their side in anticipation of what we do expect will be happening probably between 8th and 9th this month in terms of electing the speaker. Again, that tells you both formations are trying to marshal legislative numbers, so when that time comes, they are actually ready. But I am confident enough that whatever the ruling that will happen in the Supreme Court today, as a country, we shall remain peaceful, we shall remain calm, and even in that parliament, the members of parliament shall be true to the Constitution of Kenya to offer their services to the people, that the law requires them, they resolve their issues of concern and address fully.
You know, Honorable Muriu, just as Fred has said, you know, we need to see an active parliament, we need to see bills pushed. But when you look at the 13th Parliament, what is interesting is, and some have argued, it's a parliament coming in with one hand tied behind its back. You know, lower salaries, perks have been slashed, CDF is being restructured. What does that mean in terms of how MPs carry out business?
I think here is we should not undermine the mandate of the members of parliament. And I don't think there are any hands which are tied because the Constitution has given that mandate to Parliament is an oversight and legislative agenda. And I give an example. There's this issue about the CDF Act being annulled by the Supreme Court. And maybe for the benefit of our viewers, it's good to clarify that the bill which was nullified was the CDF Act 2013. The CDF Act 2015 is still operational. And therefore want to assure our people that it's still the programs which have been aligned for parcel delivery, which we promised as leaders through the CDF, be it education, be it feeding programs, be it expanding the schools, all those programs will continue. And secondly, remember these are new parliaments, 13th Parliament, and each and every party have their own manifesto. The UDA party, the Kenya Kwanza party has a very, very elaborate manifesto in terms of what we promised our people to do. And there are not many issues. And maybe just to highlight a good example, we said we shall bring the cost of living down. And our agenda here is purely budgetary because, number one, we need to bring in subsidized fertilizer so at least the cost of production can come down. The second issue, is, of course, is about the issue about the youth employment. From what you've done as Kenya Kwanza for the last 3 months, even before the election, we have gone to each and every county and talked to the people and came up with what we call economic charter. So we know exactly what needs to be done for purposes of creating employment for our youth. And finally, there is the famous Hustler Fund, whereby we want to win our people away from the Fuliza and the like, so at least everybody can have an opportunity to be able to borrow, expand their businesses, expand their farming, and all that is purely sits on the laps of members of parliament, myself included, to ensure that the Hustler Fund comes to being and our people are able to we have the proper legislation in terms of how to roll out all that. And therefore, I would say clearly, we have our hands full in terms of legislative agenda, which is ahead of us.
And beyond the task ahead for the 13th Parliament, Honorable Mbui, is this numbers game that's playing out right now. Either side, Kenya Kwanza, Azimio, are trying to get that majority. As it stands legally, Azimio has 167, Kenya Kwanza 158. Politically, though, that number shifts to 152 and 173. And it's funny that we talk about it in those terms. But that's a reality because, you know, this is still a political space that we're playing in. But what does it mean in terms of the numbers moving forward?
Thank you, Victoria. First and foremost, I'm happy that you've used the word legal and then you've used the word political. I think it's, for me, when you talk about legal, that is the right position. When you say political, I think it's something to do with bad manners, that people are elected in a coalition fighting for the virtues and the values of that coalition. Immediately after they get into public office, they switch allegiance. I mean, to be honest, Victoria, this is a problem that started a while back. And there is a Political Parties Act that is very clear, that says that if you are elected in a political party, you must subscribe to the ideals of that political party for the period within you've been elected, which is 5 years. Now, we have seen leaders in this country, every time they are elected within the course of the period of 5 years, they switch allegiance and start campaigning and working for other political parties. And that, unfortunately, is actually illegal. The deputy president, president-elect now, was a deputy party leader of Jubilee for the last 5 years. But almost the whole 5 years he was campaigning and forming his own political outfit called UDA. Yeah. And that kind of bad manners has gone to very many leaders, because we've just come from an election. People stood on podiums and said, this is what we believe in. We are in Azimio to stay. And immediately after the elections, because of the announcement of the president-elect, people start switching allegiance. I want to say to members of parliament that the role of a member of parliament is completely delinked from the executive. And if you understand your roles, which is representation, oversight, and you know, and making law, you must then therefore understand that you don't have to join another outfit. You can still do your job within the outfit for which you are elected. Now, the numbers, as you've said, give Azimio an advantage in the House. In fact, Victoria, when the House opens, Azimio is a majority party. That is by law, and they will remain majority party. But we know that there are some people that were elected under Azimio that seem to have switched allegiance. We've seen photographs taken. I'm not 100% sure, because I've not seen any signed document. After all, some of these people did sign documents with Azimio. Right. So they cannot legally be able to move out for a period of about 3 months. So they are tied to Azimio, so that Azimio remains the majority party. You'll be surprised that, and these are the options. You know that the Supreme Court can make a ruling either way. Now, if they make a ruling that is favorable to Azimio, you will see people who are defected trooping back. I mean, and that's the bad manners we are talking about. Let people just get to serve the public from where the public elected them. Now, there is also the issue of independence, Victoria. Independence, by law, are supposed to be independent. Yeah. I mean, if you are independent, it means you do not subscribe to Azimio, neither do you subscribe to Kenya Kwanza. You will make every decision that you want to make every time independently. But they've already told us, they've shown us they are not independent. About 9 of them were bought like chicken in the market and rushed to one side. And I think that's a problem. And I want to say that I hope that going forward, this parliament is not going to be the parliament that people can be bought. And that, because if that happens, then the decisions that will come out of these leaders will not be favorable to the public that elected them.
You know, Fred, what does this mean then for the future of party democracy? As Honorable Mbui has said, none of the parties that moved over to Kenya Kwanza, for instance, have submitted anything to show that we are on this side. And it seems more cosmetic, superficial at this point. You know, what do you make of this bandwagon effect that's taking place in Parliament?
Vicky, we have seen photo shoots in Karen where, unfortunately, certain members who were elected on a different political party and they believed in the ideology of that party or that coalition going for photo shoot with William Ruto in Karen. And today, they are actually saying they are manifesting the ideology of Kenya Kwanza or UDA. The Political Parties Act, Section 14, actually condemns that. No person shall be a member of more than 2 parties. And if you do that, then you shall be deemed to have resigned from your party. You know what that means? When they go to Parliament on 8th or 9th, after taking oath of office, then there are those what we call parliamentary committees. Yeah. How do they expect their coalition to allocate them parliamentary committees as members, while in this instance, they have demonstrated that they are swearing allegiance somewhere else? Number 2, these members who are now trying to play both cards, what message are they sending to the people who elected them? Because when you are elected on a certain ideology. For instance, I have seen members who are independent, and they were elected on independent ticket. They believe in certain ideologies. I have seen members who were once in Azimio, and they believed in the Azimio ideology, you know, economic revolution, social infrastructure, good governance, as we always said in Azimio. They are now moving to Kenya Kwanza that they never campaigned for, they never participated in their meetings, they don't know their ideology, but they are manifesting that ideology. It means, therefore, Vicky, that these are people who actually, by law and by deed of Section 14 of Political Parties Act, have moved. So if Mbui and their colleagues go to Parliament and they'll be restructuring committees, then they should not be counted therein. But there's something that is interesting that is likely to happen today, God willing, and we pray that we remain peaceful when that ruling happens. If that ruling favors the petitioners, then the same people will come back saying that, you know, we were misled, you know, they were trying to lure us. But in the middle of, I mean, in daylight, we saw them taking photos in a very corroborated photo shoot. So, Vicky, what is happening is very simple. This parliament, the 13th parliament, must stop being excited. This parliament must remember that they were elected on the basis of resolving the issues of concern to the public. This parliament must remember that whether you are in Azimio or in Kenya Kwanza, the issues of concern are more or less the same. The high cost of living. If you look at how Kenyans are suffering today, the legislative agenda, the intrigue that they are getting in the 13th parliament is so huge, and they must address these issues pronto. And therefore, there is no time to try and maneuver around a probable executive so that you can be helped. In fact, as a matter of fact, Vicky, the member of parliament, whether you are a senator or a National Assembly member, you don't really need the support as such of executive to help your people, because your role is legislation, representation, and oversight. And that's why, for a member of National Assembly, you represent nationally issues of national concern. So we do expect that these 13th Parliament to behave, they avoid bad manners, and they ensure that the people who put them in place are having the services as promised by them or are committed by them.
You know, Honorable Muriu, as far as this numbers debate goes, where do you sit, on the legal or the political side of things?
Thank you, Vicky. And before I come there, I'll give you which side I sit. I just want to clear up one issue. My panelists here, they are in the Azimio coalition. I'm in the Kenya Kwanza coalition. And the fact that there are some members of the Azimio moving to UDA Kenya Kwanza faction, that tells us something, and it's coming immediately after the election. It says something that even before the ink of those agreements gets dry, members are moving to Kenya Kwanza. That tells something that those agreements were done through intimidation, they were done through coercion, and it was not voluntary. And that tells him that the bedrock of those agreements were shaky and suspicious. Number 2, Chapter 4 of the Constitution gives everybody a Bill of Rights and the freedom of association, and that supersedes any other contract, any other agreement with anybody. They are free to come and join Kenya Kwanza. And I will tell you here, as a Secretary Church of Legal Affairs, we are not offering them any incentives. They are coming purely because they have found that the manifesto of UDA party and Kenya Kwanza it's superior, and therefore they want in the next political dispensation to work with us. Just to answer Mr. Fred here on the issue about the parliamentary agenda, members of parliament do not work in a vacuum. They are there to push the manifesto under which they were elected. And therefore, by pushing that agenda, that does not mean they become subservient to the executive. It means that their legislative agenda is well tied to the executive because they are the ones who have been able to put that government in place. Coming to the numbers, because again, these numbers, I guess you have seen, is 157, again 168, then 176, again 178. I would say these numbers are still shifting. And from where I sit, for me, I'm a practical legislator. Once we go to Parliament, the moment we make a call, remember, this is a game of persuasion. You must persuade people. Even the people who are already Azimio, they are not also tied down there. Mm-hmm. You may find that if you go to Parliament and the first agenda be the election of the Speaker, and we are able to persuade even the Azimio diehards to vote for a candidate, there is no harm with that. He does not become a lesser speaker, or he does not become invalidated by being elected by people from different sides. So for me, I want to remain very practical. I want to remain take a very persuasive position. We are not slaves of the law. And the moment you are able to persuade the people that our speaker will be more impartial in terms of pushing the national agenda forward, then be it. So for me, yes, there is a legal provision, but again, I want to be very, very practical when it comes to matters of the Parliament. You know,
Honourable Bui, I saw you smirking as you heard Honourable Muri talk about why several of those members of Parliament moved over to Kenya Kwanza. And, you know, it brings up the question as to, I mean, defections are not new. They've been happening in the political space for a long time. But there's a fear that there's a death of ideology as a result of these defections. And when will we ever, as a country, politically get to that place of ideas? And what impact does that have on the electorate? You know, there's this perception that Parliament is a house of interests, not of the people. So how do we kind of shift that conversation or that narrative?
Yeah, first, thank you. And first, allow me, you know, it's been very amusing listening to the legal secretary of the UDA party, the honorable member for Gatanga. I mean, he says that just after some people were elected to Parliament, they suddenly realized that the manifesto of Kenya Kwanza was superior to the one of Azimio. And yet they had all this opportunity to know what Azimio stood for and what Kenya Kwanza stood for. So doesn't that already, you know, really paint a negative picture of that kind of leadership? That you've been here campaigning for the last 3-4 months on a platform of one political party, and then suddenly you realize that after you've just won the election, that this other party was more superior. The reality is this, that this happened immediately after the announcement by Chebukati of the president-elect. I mean, that's why I'm saying that these members seem to forget the purpose for which they were elected. They think that you must be, you know, very close to the person who is the president for you to deliver on the promise. The issue is that, and the fact is that you just need to do your job as a member of Parliament, and that would be good enough. Now, he also did say that we cannot be slaves of the law. And my friend Honorable Muri, you are a legislator now. How can you talk about being a slave of the law? Yet you are the one who's supposed to make laws and ensure that these laws are followed, because really, at the end of the day, we make laws that are supposed to be for posterity. The issue of the Political Parties Act, telling or trying to contain political leaders within their political formations is just a matter of good manners, so that you can be able to know exactly who believes in what and how do we work together. If we allow every member to wake up every day and choose where they will go and how they will operate, then we are going to have chaos. So it's important that those things are made clear. But having said that, I think as a country we need to move to the direction that Victoria you have raised, which is to be able as a country to have ideas that we can compete with. And I saw a lot of that in these last elections, these last campaigns. We as Azimio One Kenya, we had a lot of ideas, a lot of things that we promised that we would be able to do. We looked at the struggle that Kenyans go through in education. You look at, you know, parents pay fees all the way from ECD classes, because most counties haven't got any ECD teachers paid by the county governments. So parents have to pay whatever enough fees to be able to pay these teachers. You go to primary school, even though primary education is free, there's a lot of things that parents are still paying for. Other than uniform and clothes, they'll pay for the examinations, they'll pay for activities, they'll pay for school trips. That is a lot of money coming out of these parents. Secondary fees, again, also has issues. So we looked at all that and we thought that it's important to try and reduce the burden on parents by providing actual free education. So there are certain things. They said that, on the other hand, that, and we also said as Azimio that those families that are hard hit by poverty, we'll provide them a stipend so that they can be able to manage their affairs. Because, I mean, it is very unfortunate to see a family that goes hungry in this century when we have a government in place and we have, you know, people are paying taxes in this country. So we came up with ideas that would have been able to carry the country forward. On the other hand, Kenya Kwanza also had some good ideas. Yep. So I think on this particular one, there was a lot of ideologies that were being fronted. But the problem now is the leaders themselves. Why can't we stick to our ideas and stop jumping ship just because somebody else has one? That would be my only take on that.
All right. On that note of ideas, ideology, let's take a short break here on Kenya's Choice 2022. My guests still with me as we get into the race for Speaker of the House and what that will shape up to look like. We'll be right back.